Welcome back to Better Odds Sports Betting. I'm your host, Kiev O'Neill.
And I'm Kyle Hunter.
And we are joined by Ian Cameron, host of Pub Sports Radio and Ice Guys Hockey Betting Show. You can follow him on Twitter at Bobano. Ian, how's your week been treating you? Oh, it looks like we just lost him. Hopefully he can pop back on. Well, Kyle, how's your week been treating you?
So I've been doing all right. It was good beginning of the March Madness as far as betting for me. The last couple of days I didn't do as well. So hopefully the Sweet 16 brings back what I had there at the beginning of the round of 64. But looking forward to these games. I think there's some pretty good games here. I know we have some Cinderellas in there that sometimes the games aren't quite as great, but I still think we have quite a bit of intriguing matchups here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I started out, had a great Friday, a medium Saturday, a great Sunday, and then a bad Monday. So it was kind of like, and Monday it's like, I felt like I was forcing it a little bit on a couple. I mean, you like it, but then Maryland, like a play like Ohio. If Ohio just could not shoot anything that day. And Maryland they ran to a buzzsaw. I believe Alabama was 1.44 points per possession that game, So
yep, I had the under in that one. So that one was one that I turned off after a little while. I was tired of seeing every single shot go in. Maryland actually shot pretty well, and they still lost that bad. So,
oh, for sure. Well, we can pause a little bit and wait see if Ian can pop back on here. Maybe you can shoot him a text, but
yeah, it looks like he just sent me a message and he says his internet modem just power cycled. So hey, he said, hang in there for a few minutes and I should be able to join back in. So we'll just keep going here a little bit. Kiev, do you like any futures right now, or do you have any futures going? I know that some of the things that people have been looking at is futures here that they already bet, or things that you might want to bet at this point.
So I only have one future that's alive. I think I bet 5 of them total. I gave out 2 of them. It was a tough year for futures for me because normally I get like 2 to if you bet 5, I get 2 or 3 in the Elite 8 usually, and I only have 1, and it's USC. And because of the fact that I would want to make up for the half units or beer money or whatever I put on those futures before, I'm probably not going to start hedging, and I really shouldn't anyway, because the Zags are going to be a pretty big favorite if USC beats Oregon. I would rather go for the bigger ticket later if they happen to get to beat Oregon and get to Gonzaga. And I won't even hedge Gonzaga because they get in the Final Four, then they have a tough game against Alabama, Florida State, or Michigan, which they're going to be a dog probably. USC is a 6 seed, and then obviously if they play a Baylor, they're going to be another dog. So I mean, my only shot is in game against Gonzaga to get to the Final Four. If I could find them at plus money, maybe USC would be winning at halftime or something close to that, or towards the end of the game. So not a great future year for me. Obviously conference championship, we did hit Georgia Tech at 16-1 and at 25-1. So that was fantastic. But how about you, Kyle?
Well, I have the Loyola Chicago future that was a really long shot that, I think it was, I bet $40 to win 10,000 or something like that. So I hedged it some against Illinois. I wish I wouldn't have done it, but I figured that was a tough matchup for them. Obviously, a lot of people did. I still have plenty of positive there. So that one's still alive. And that was a good call on USC. And the Pac-12 has been far better than what anybody expected at this point, certainly.
Yeah, absolutely. The Pac-12. So for you, the good thing is at least Loyola's favored, for you. So your ticket is still looking pretty good. I know you probably had to lay like minus 300 or something against Illinois, I would guess, maybe a little bit more.
I think it was like 295 or 300. But yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I wish I'd have just let it ride. But it's easy to say let a future ride with Loyola when they're up against the team that a lot of people were picking to win the whole tournament. So
right.
I'm going to try to not put anything on Oregon State before the game. If I have to, and live betting, I'll try to put something on them. But let's talk about that game here in a minute. Ian's back. So welcome back, Ian. Hopefully everything's all set up there now.
Yeah, everything's good, Kev and Kyle. Thanks for having me on the show, and looking forward to the Sweet 16. I mean, this is where the rubber meets the road, and we find out who's ready to face the pressure of Sweet 16 basketball, and obviously getting one step closer to a national title and a Final Four.
That's right. Yeah, it's just a fun weekend. And if you go to Vegas, I'll tell you, I prefer the Sweet 16 more than the NCAA tournament because the prices are massively jacked. And sure, you can play your parlays, but now we can play parlays pretty much anywhere on apps or wherever you want. But if you want a good time in Vegas, it's not as big, but it's still big. It still draws a decent enough crowd, and it's still fun, but nothing is overcrowded or packed, and you're not going to get price gouged. So just wanted to throw that out there that I've had some of going to the Strip. I've had some of my favorite times during the Sweet 16, mostly before I had kids. So I want to throw that out there. But yeah, Ian, we were just talking about futures, and to be honest with you, taking one now, the prices are terrible just because Gonzaga is such a big favorite over anybody. Arkansas is the only one I'd look at because they have the easiest road to the Sweet 16 or to Elite 8 from the Sweet 16, yet they're only 20-1. You can get 20-1 even if they don't play Gonzaga. I calculated on a money line rollover, and if they do play Gonzaga and you think Arkansas is going to win it all, then you get over 50-1 just on a money line rollover that I calculated. So, Kyle, any agreement or disagreement?
Yeah, I could see Arkansas being the one that has some value, but I don't know if I mean, I like Arkansas to win this next game, but I don't know if I love their potential to get really deep into this tournament. So I think there were some values going into the tournament. It's hard to find as many right now, and I think it is important for people to remember that those money line rollovers can be helpful because sometimes when you get those futures, it's a little bit hard to hedge. It's hard to know exactly how to do that when you're in a good spot. With the money line rollover, you can just stop betting, so it's not hard to figure that out at that point. So I think probably a good time, Kiev. Let's just get into the games now.
Yeah, let's get into the games. Unless you guys have any systems or trends to share.
Oh yeah, I do have a couple here. Spreads of 7.5 or more in the Sweet 16. So we're talking games that are not supposed to be very close. The under is 19-8 in the last 27. So, I mean, this makes sense because there's less of the fouling. You know, both of you guys have seen how these games go. At the end of the game, if the spread's 6 or 7 points, 4, 5, 6, 7, you can get a ton of points in the last minute of that game. So the system would say bet the under in a game with a wide spread. The only problem with that is that the two games that fit that here this season are the ones that are the best fits for that this year. Who wants to bet Gonzaga and Creighton under or Oral Roberts and Arkansas under? I mean, it's hard. It's not an easy play to make. They're high numbers, so you could argue that maybe you could take the under. But that's one system that I had. And then the other system, I'll just go ahead and say the other one real quick. Teams covering less than 55% of the time on the year, so their ATS cover rate is less than 55% versus a team covering more than 55% of the time on the year. In the Sweet 16, you bet on the team covering less. You're 37-18 ATS in the last 55. Now, I know this is a smaller sample size, and, we can't get a massive sample size from the Sweet 16 because there's only so many games. But this is a smaller sample size, but it does make sense. The teams that have just been making money ATS time after time, bettors can push that price up pretty high to where you're paying quite the premium.
Like Oregon State would probably be one that wasn't that good of an ATS team, I would imagine. I'd have to take a look until I would guess the tournament, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't have it right in front of me to know for sure. I do know Oregon State's been a machine lately. They weren't a machine earlier in the year. I remember them. I think they lost to Portland, and they had some games in there where they were just playing terribly. It's hard to believe that's the same team that's been winning all these games in a row.
Well, we'll get into that.
I remember betting against Oregon State with Texas San Antonio early in the year, thinking that's how bad they were at home. And they actually came back, won and covered in that game, but it was a life or death situation. I mean, Texas San Antonio led the majority of that game. Oregon State couldn't get anything going offensively for the entire first half of that game, and then they got on a run in the second half, won and covered. But you think of the improvement that this team has made, and Wayne Tinkle has talked about it to anyone that'll listen, that he felt mid-February this team was – he changed the way he was doing things defensively. He threw in a little bit more zone, and he's been throwing a lot of zone defense at opposing teams lately, mixing in some man-to-man, and he was talking about in the media that the players have bought into it. It's not only that you've changed your defense a little bit, you got to get the players to buy in and execute. And man alive, have they done that. And it's been a big catalyst toward Oregon State's late season run, Pac-12 tournament, and now here in the big dance.
Well, fantastic stuff there. Let's get right into that game then. Unless you have any other trends, I think we should start with Oregon State versus Loyola. Kind of go by the time. This will be on first. Loyola is about a 6.5 point spread. Total's about 125.5. I'll start with you, Ian.
Yeah, I mean, Oregon State is a team that I took them against Tennessee. And for me, that was more anti-Tennessee sentiment for me. Not buying into Rick Barnes at tournament time. And sure enough, he goes out in the first round with a whimper, which has become a tradition for him when it comes to March basketball. But I also was convinced Tennessee doesn't have the offense really to be laying that kind of number. And of course, Oregon State played just stifling defense. And I just talked about a minute ago how they played excellent defense down the stretch. Now, against Oklahoma State, that's where I thought maybe the magic run would end for this Beavers team, but it didn't happen. And now you see the way they neutralized that Oklahoma State Cowboys team. First of all, they didn't really let them get out, and they dictated the pace of the game. And they really didn't let Oklahoma State get anything going in transition, which is, of course, critical for success for them offensively. It was an excellent defensive game once again for Oregon State. Now, there are some statistics that would concern you a little bit. Going into this game, they're shooting at an unreal off-the-chart percentage from the perimeter, from three-point range in this tournament, and their opponents have been getting just missing some looks, whether that's good perimeter defense, whether that's just missing wide-open looks. I think there's a little bit of both in that distinction when it comes to Oregon State. Can that keep up again one more time? And as much as I like Tennessee defensively, they're solid. Oklahoma State, not quite as much. You got to be impressed with what you saw to Loyola Chicago at the defensive end against Illinois. I mean, they basically frustrated Ayo Dosunmu like I've never seen at any point this season. What do you have, more turnovers than points in that game? That's not supposed to happen in that kind of stage with that caliber of player. And Loyola Chicago just basically, Frazier was non-existent. You saw the shot of Kofi Coburn in the second half, struggling to keep up with Cameron Krutwig down low in the low post on the block. I mean, it was just a complete terrific performance by Loyola Chicago. And when I look at these two teams, and I've watched a lot of them this year, as you guys I'm sure have, I still have to think Loyola Chicago is the better of these two teams. But from a point spread perspective, guys, it's hard for me to step in front of the Beavers right now because there's been times where you say, oh, the run can't keep going. Oh, the run can't keep going. But you're seeing Ethan Thompson. You're seeing Jared Lucas make big plays offensively. You're seeing the young front court with Alatishe. Where does this guy come from? He's been a monster down low for Oregon State. So it's basically banging your head against the wall trying to project, oh, the magic is going to run out for this team until I actually see it. In this price range, in a slow-paced game, two good defensive teams, it's hard to lay this many points in a game like this against Oregon State. So I do lean Beavers, but it's really just a light opinion for me.
Kyle?
So I'm really torn on this game because I do think Loyola will win this game. I would be surprised if Oregon State wins this game. If you look in there, Oregon State in the last month, to Ian's point, has been amazing on offense. And I don't know where this hot shooting has come from Oregon State. They're 21st in offensive efficiency in the last month in the country. This is a team that earlier in the season was really bad offensively. I think they're probably not as good offensively as what they look like here of late. And Loyola's defense is clearly better than what they've been playing against. So I think that will bother them. You could make an argument for the under here, but the under is at 125.5. You know, it's hard to take an under at that value, especially when the spread is at a number where there could be a fouling fest there at the end of the game. You know, I want to take Loyola here. My problem with taking Loyola is you're laying 7 points with a total of 125.5. And I think that's what Ian was saying too, is that, you know, it's hard to lay this many points in a game where points are going to be in a premium. You know, I mean, Loyola could score 63 points and win 63-56 or 63-57. It wouldn't be very surprising. You know, I think this is a tough one because I want to take Loyola, but I also kind of wonder if you're buying at the high point for Loyola because, you know, we just saw them beat the number 1 seed. You know, you want to try to buy low, sell high, kind of like you do in the stock market. Loyola is certainly not low at this point as far as public perception. You could argue neither is Oregon State. So both of these teams' perception of them is quite high at this point. One question I have about Oregon State is, can they guard Krutwig in the post? Because Oregon State is 47th percentile in defending post-up defense. I think Krutwig will have a big game here. And every game, my wife watches these games with me sometimes. My kids watch these games with me sometimes. Every game, my wife goes, "How old is that guy? How old is that Cameron Crutwig guy?" He looks like he's like 35 years old, and he does. I mean, he doesn't look like somebody that would dominate a game, but every game he does. He's really good, very solid player. And Williamson also on defense is tremendous defensively. We saw what he did to the Illini guards, like Ian said. I think Loyola wins this game. I'm not sure if I can lay the 6.5 or 7 points. Most of them are 7 now, as far as across the board, almost all 7s. Loyola has gotten some pretty good money here coming in over the last day or so. So I don't know what I'm going to do with this game. I kind of lean Loyola, but I hate laying this many points with this low of a total. So Kiev, what do you have on this one?
Well, I mean, here's the problem with the way I first approached this Sweet 16 is I didn't like a ton of dogs, and it worries me when I don't like a lot of dogs, because I think I made my best progress betting this first round, betting on a lot of the dogs like the Oral Robertses and Abilene Christians and things like that, And so, I mean, look at it, Loyola, maybe it's their 8 seed that's keeping them lower, I guess, because let's just say Loyola was Alabama, right? And they're right next to Alabama on a lot of the efficiency rankings. Would this be a 6.5 point spread against Oregon State? Well, UCLA is about a 6.5, 7 point spread against Bama. I scratched my head a little bit about that, right? So maybe it is still a little bit low. I don't know, but you're not going to make a living, taking big favorites in tournament type situations like this. And I'm scratching my head on the Beavers. What the Beavers did to the Pac-12 perception is make it worse for people coming into the tournament. They're like, oh my God, Colorado, USC, Oregon, they're losing to the Beavers in the Pac-12 tournament. The Pac-12 must be horrible. It made it worse for a lot of people that faded the Pac-12 coming in. I think I was fortunate not to jump into that. I'm glad that I stayed away from that. I got to tell you, Tennessee shot 33% against them. Oklahoma State, who was my Final Four team, I thought I had a leg up when Illinois lost. Well, guess what? They shot 27%, 28%, something like that, right? I have to think that they're going to be some regression here back to what they were, and I can't bet on the Beavers here. I just can't. I did bet on Loyola, but I took a better number than this. Now, if this thing gets a little bit higher, a couple points from where I bet it at 6, I will consider a buyback. But finally, you look at teams like Loyola and Baylor right there. In football, that would be like teaser, 7.5 down to 1.5, 6.5. You can get past the 6, 4, 3. But a money line parlay would be the same type of thing. You'd lay about minus 120 on it. So, if you want to bet this, that could be a better way to do it, is take Baylor and them on a money line parlay. But right now it's 7. I can't give it out as a play.
I'll throw one last little point about this game. Crutwig could dominate down low because what he did against Coburn was impressive last week. Coburn's having a great season for Illinois, and he basically just owned him, dominated him down low. And as much as Oregon State and the likes of Alatisha and some guys in the front court have impressed, this is a big ask because Cameron Crutwig, not only when he gets the ball down low, he's a good passer. You see this cutting action and all this movement off the ball that Loyola Chicago does. You got to have your head on a swivel when you're trying to defend the Ramblers, especially because their half-court offensive execution is just so pristine. It's so good. It's so sharp. And Oregon State's going to have to adjust to that because, let's be honest, Tennessee is not the offensive creative team that Loyola Chicago is. And another key for them, Williamson and Braden Norris, the guard play for Loyola Chicago. It's been spotty at times. Hasn't been necessarily consistent. They came to play against Illinois, and they provided some offense. They provided some scoring punch. If they do that again, combined with Crutwig in the paint, if they have those 3 guys all playing like they did against Illinois, it's going to be tough for the Beavers here.
Totally agree. Let's move on to the next game, Villanova versus Baylor. And this thing's up to 7.5 now, total at 142. That total was lower before. If you look at this game, what are the teams right now? I mean, Baylor, I think, is back to what they were when they beat Illinois in the non-conference by 13, when they were running through the Big 12 like a freight train, beating everybody by double digits. I think they're back to that. But Nova, I scratch my head. It's Jay Wright. It's hard to bet against Jay Wright, especially against Scott Drew here, and that's what's making me almost starting to flip my mind here. And I had Baylor as a big lean at 6.5, but this thing's getting a little too high. And I mean, would you be shocked if a Jay Wright team won here? I wouldn't, so that's what's worrying me. But I think the best play here for me is the over. I mean, Nova doesn't give up the ball a ton, but Baylor ranks third in forcing turnovers, and their defense isn't that great. I think that their turnovers, show that their defense is good on paper. But Wisconsin, when they played them, they missed a lot of threes. I think they shot like 33% from three, and you're not going to be Baylor doing that. They're missing some open looks, but I think Nova's going to get their points here. But I also metrically figured this game out to be about 78.5 to 70.5. So this put me at 149 for the total. And I scratched my head a couple times because, the total was like 138, 140. And that's where I took it. I took the over at 140, and I had to make it a big play because I was just that far off. And then I looked at some of the other metric sites that, they were at 148, like Bart Torvik and Ken Palm. And so I felt a little bit better about it. And I think I was a little bit higher, but I did penalize them for the neutral court and brought it down to 149. So I'm still big on the over here. Kyle, why don't you go first?
Yeah, I like the over as well. Baylor's defensive efficiency in the last month is 137th, the 39th for the year. Now, off that COVID pause, I think we could give them a bit of a break in saying that they probably are better defensively than 137th. At the same time, Villanova, Robinson Earl's been really good. I think he's going to do a good job in the post and in the high post as well. Jay Wright's going to be able to attack that Baylor defense where they're not great in the front court defensively. The problem for Villanova is really weak on perimeter defense. A team that you don't want to play if you're weak on perimeter defense is Baylor. Baylor can really make you pay for that. They shoot it extremely well from three-point range. I don't want to bet against Jay Wright because I respect him quite a bit. But at the same time, if this game finished, with Baylor winning by 15 or 20 points, I don't think I could be very surprised either because Baylor is clearly the more talented team here. And if you look at Villanova, look, congratulations for getting to this point, but this is a huge step up in class. They just played Winthrop. This is a Winthrop team in the North Texas. North Texas, they had their NCAA tournament moment by winning that first game. That was definitely a letdown spot in that second game. Now you go play Baylor, who for the season has really probably been the second best team in the country. If I were betting aside here, I think I'd lay the points with Baylor. I like the over better, though.
Okay. And yeah, you're right. North Texas, when they played Purdue just couldn't hit anything. I mean, it was amazing seeing how frustrated they looked. They could hit 10-foot shots, paint shots, no threes. And I was like, wow, North Texas is going to be a fraudulent team coming into the next round. And I laid the points with Nova, thank goodness. But this is the time that, my spread has it at 8, so I guess I can't disagree with Kyle there. Ian, what are your thoughts?
I'm pretty much in lockstep with what Kyle said. I actually laid the points with Baylor here in this game. And it worries me. Jay Wright, we're talking about a guy that, what is his tournament record? He's only, I think, 16-2 in his last 18 tournament games. I mean, that's what we're going against here with Jay Wright, who's an elite coach. You're giving him a week to prepare for this game. Like, if there's at least going to be a puncher's chance for Villanova to bring their best foot forward and their best game to the court here on Saturday against Baylor, it's going to be in this spot. When you get an elite head coach who can prepare and get a game plan set with a week time, with 1 week to get his team ready, that's what you're going to have to hope for if you're Villanova, because in terms of the matchups on the floor, I don't see many edges here for Villanova. Kyle, you mentioned it. The perimeter defense is not good. It borderline stinks, in my opinion, for Villanova. And you've got Jared Butler, you've got Maceo Teague, Davion Mitchell, Matt Meyer, the energy spark plug of this Baylor team that can all jack from three-point range and hit at a high percentage. That's trouble for Villanova. I think they can neutralize. Jeremiah Robinson Earl is a good low post presence, but I think there's some size. Mark Vidal, I think, can handle him a little bit for Baylor. And when you look at this game, from my opinion, two words, actually 4 words, I guess you could say. The first 2 words are Colin Gillespie, and the next 2 words are ball pressure. You could also use ball handling as well. I think Villanova is going to struggle in that regard here. Colin Gillespie's good, not only facilitating the offense all season, but this is, I think, where his absence finally shows up. Baylor really gets a lot of on-ball pressure from their guards. They could really, really frustrate Justin Moore a little bit. He's played, you give him credit. He's played well. I think he stepped his game up in Gillespie's absence. He's had to for a depleted backcourt going into this tournament. But I think handling the ball is going to be a problem for Villanova now in this game against Baylor because they really pressure you. They don't really let you get set up in that half court very, very easily. I just think there's a boatload of matchup problems that I see for Villanova in this game. But as you guys mentioned it, I mean, Jay Wright's a phenomenal coach. And if there's one guy that's going to cook up a game plan to have his team in the best possible position to compete and maybe pull off an upset, it's him. I just don't see it without good Baylor's. And I know their defense has declined efficiency-wise. You look at the efficiency numbers, it's gone down for them. But I think a lot of that was in the first couple weeks or the first couple games after their COVID pause. I think they've gotten back to much better defense against their first two tournament games against Hartford and Wisconsin. So I think they're starting to resemble more that early season Baylor defense. I would still like the over in this game, though, with you guys because of the fact we think of Baylor defensively as this great defensive team. I think we don't give enough respect to them being a great offensive team as well, and the inside-outside balance they have and their three-point shooting. So I'm with you guys. I laid the points with Baylor, and I'm also liking this game over the total.
And don't forget to mention Jonathan Tchamwa Tchatchoua because he's probably got one of the best names in basketball, and he's a great rebounder for this Baylor team.
No doubt.
Yeah. Baylor plays a pretty fast game too because 16.5 seconds per possession, ranked 78th. So that gives me a little bit more confidence on the over as well. This feels like the Creighton Nova game when Creighton blew out Nova, but the score went to like 165 points. So that's what it kind of feels like to me. So we'll see what happens. Let's move on to the next game then, Kyle. And this one's interesting because we have a big spread. We have a Cinderella here, a 15 seed. Going against Arkansas. And Arkansas was a tough team in the SEC, one of the top three for sure, probably top two with Bama. I think I go Bama, Arkansas, LSU. I think that's how I would rank them. But either way, tough matchup for Oral Roberts. Kyle, why don't you go first?
Yeah, this one's an interesting matchup because Arkansas and Oral Roberts played earlier in the season. Oral Roberts did stay in that game, actually led in the second half at one point, and then Max Asmus was not able to play. He was in foul trouble. Then Arkansas goes on a big run. Then Arkansas ends up winning the game. That was at Arkansas. 11.5 is a lot of points to lay this time of the year. I'm not in love with laying 11.5 points. At the same time, I don't know how much I really want to take Oral Roberts here because how often are they going to be able to look good defensively? You look at their for the year, on the season, they're 239th in defensive efficiency. And the last month, they're 102nd. Ohio State had some good shots that they just bricked. Florida didn't score in the last few minutes of that game. Florida definitely gave that one away. Oral Roberts, you have to give them credit for being at this point, but they're at least a little bit fortunate to be, in the Sweet 16. And Oral Roberts defensively, I think it's still a bad team. I think Oral Roberts is going to give up a lot of points here. The question is, how many are they going to score? O'Banner has done tremendous. He's played really good. He wasn't really hyped going into this, but he's been excellent. The one thing that I wanted to point out here is Arkansas, time and time again, we've seen them struggle at the beginning of the game. I remember the Colgate game. At one point, Arkansas was +4, +3 on the live lines there in the first half against Colgate. And then Texas Tech gets a decent lead on them there in the second game as well. And if you go back through their games at the end of the regular season, nearly every game they've been behind 8 or 10 minutes into the game, even when they end up winning by double figures. So I think the way that I'd like to look at this is not bet anything on the game pre-flop and look to try to possibly find a spot to bet Arkansas live here. I think Arkansas wins this game. Maybe we see an Arkansas -5 or 6 or something like that because Oral Roberts starts the game pretty quickly. If so, I'd like to lay it with Arkansas on this one. I'm not going to lay 11.5 before the game when I feel like there's a decent chance I'll get a better price during the game. As far as the total, like I said, this one fits the angle of betting unders. I don't love betting unders with a team like Oral Roberts, who is so good on offense. and really doesn't guard anybody on defense. If Arkansas is making those outside shots, this could be really high. So I'm not going to bet anything on this game beforehand, but Arkansas may be a good bet live here.
Ian?
Arkansas may be a better bet live than pregame because they've also started very slow. They started very slow, obviously, against Colgate in the first round game. Texas Tech, they played better in the early part of that game, but you're right. You worry about a slow start, and you worry about Oral Roberts. They've had fast starts. Now, Oral Roberts, defensively, they have improved. There's no question a little bit. Really, it's from the beginning of the Summit League Conference tournament. I think that's probably when you can say their defense has improved a little bit. I still don't think they're great defensively either, but I got to give credit where credit's due. I mean, Ohio State's an excellent offensive team, and to see them just put the clamp down on the Buckeyes, playing in arguably the best conference in the Big, well, it was arguably the best conference in the Big Ten, apparently, till the NCAA tournament started. But nevertheless,
hey, take it easy. Take it easy. All right.
Yeah, we're both Big Ten guys now. I agree.
We'll take it easy. I like you guys, so yeah, I'll be a little nicer on the Big Ten. But yeah, the tournament showing so far has been a little less than we thought. But nevertheless, Oral Roberts has improved defensively, and I've been on Oral Roberts these two games. I took the points against Ohio State. I took the points against Florida. I was really confident they could beat Florida. I've not been a Florida guy all year with that Gators team. Trey Mann and Appleby, and to me, the offense just stagnates outside of those two. They're not that great front court this year. And sure enough, they struggled to get baskets down the stretch, and Oral Roberts made that run in the second half and ended up winning that game. It's going to be much different. Arkansas is going to pressure you, no question. Can they handle that? Are they going to get worn out? And the thing that worries me, too, about these double-digit seeds like an Oral Roberts, we have seen evidence of this in the past. You have that great opening weekend. You have those two big wins, and then the next round comes the Sweet 16. You have a week off. You hear people saying how great you are. What a run. What a Cinderella team. Everybody talking Oral Roberts, what a great couple of wins they had. And then you just run out of steam and you hit the wall in the Sweet 16. Because I keep thinking of Florida Gulf Coast several years ago, when they beat Georgetown and they beat San Diego State in the first two rounds. And then I think they had to play, I believe it was Florida after that in the Sweet 16, and they hit the wall. That was it for Florida Gulf Coast, of course, coached by Andy Enfield at the time before he went to USC, Dunk City. We remember that team very well. That could happen to Oral Roberts here, but it's a lot of points. And if the way I see it and my betting style, guys, is like when I'm on a team and I've cashed with them a couple of times and they're red hot, they're playing their best ball, I usually ride the hot team. I ride the hot, I fade the cold. That's usually one of my strategies. And to me, I would look to the points here with Oral Roberts, maybe even break it up I will do this here in this game between the first half and the full game, because I do get a worry that 40 minutes of pressure from Musselman's team could get to Oral Roberts and wear them down a little bit in the second half, which is something we've seen. So I like Oral enough to take the points, but I'm probably going to split it up between the first half and the full game.
What worried me with this Arkansas-Texas Tech game, it seems like Texas Tech really dominated the pace of play in that game. But the good news for Arkansas, and this worries me down the road, I guess, if they have to face like Oregon or something, or USC, Arkansas, they've already kind of had a scare, right, against Colgate. I mean, it was the end of the second half, they're down by 14, and then Colgate just, their best player gets in foul trouble. They have to bench him, and then Arkansas just puts on a whooping. It comes up like, I think 17-0 points were scored, and they're winning. They're winning at half. It's shocking people. And then they end up covering that game. Arkansas's got the talent, and we do have a small sample size because these two teams did play each other, and Arkansas won by 11 points. I don't know what the spread was in that game. I don't know if you guys have it handy, but I'm guessing it was probably close to that. I think Oral Roberts is going to be a public dog. I think that the public's going to be jumping all over this one because Oral Roberts did cover twice, and thank goodness we were on Oral Roberts with a little sprinkle on the money line, both of those games. But Arkansas ranks 10th in defense. Oral Roberts, like Kyle said, 234th, and maybe they've improved a little bit, like Ian just said. But if you look at the shooting, Arkansas is a better shooting team, 45.3% to 44.3%, and this is a much better conference that they're shooting in than the Summit League, obviously, right? I'm going to watch this line. I think the public's going to jump all over Oral Roberts, and I think if you're going to bet Arkansas, you wait until the very end. If you like Oral Roberts, you probably take them right now. But I like what you guys said a little bit. Arkansas has been slow. And of course, this would be the game that they don't start slow, but maybe you take the first half under. And if you don't trust anything so much, you take the first half under because there's a chance Oral Roberts doesn't put up a ton of points. And then you come hard with Arkansas on the spread in the second half. But
and I was just going to say, I'll make one last point about this game. You mentioned it, public dog, potentially, for sure. That was actually in play with Oral Roberts, Florida. Oral Roberts was a public dog, and yet the money was pouring in on Florida, hand over fist. Florida went up, the line went up in that game, and sure enough, Oral Roberts ends up winning that game. However, I will say this, Arkansas is a lot better than Florida. I have no doubt about that in my mind. Arkansas is a much better team, a much deeper team, a better offensive team, much better coach team. I'm not a big Mike White person. I never have been since he's been there at Florida. Eric Musselman, to me, we saw what he did at Nevada. We've seen what he's doing here at Arkansas. So this is definitely a step up from Florida for this Oral Bob team.
Yeah, and if it gets close to the 10 range, I will play Arkansas anyway. And I'll tell you why. The turnover margin was 10 against Ohio State. Ohio State couldn't even hit a free throw that game. If that was an even turnover margin, Ohio State, they win by what? 10, 15 points, right? Same
and
thing
Texas
with Florida.
Tech guys barely, they missed some good looks inside at the rim right in the dying seconds against Arkansas. There were some chances for them to maybe steal that one against Arkansas. So they were right there against the Razorbacks. So that tells you how thin the margin is in the tournament.
That was a great coaching matchup, Chris Beard versus Eric Musselman, too. So I agree. Well, let's move on to the final game then. Syracuse versus Houston. Houston's about -6-ish, 5.5 I've seen. Total still hanging around 140 here. I'll let you start, Ian.
So I'm on Syracuse. And again, this goes back to Oral Roberts. I've been on Syracuse the first two games against San Diego State and again against West Virginia. They got the job done. And isn't this what Jim Boeheim does in March, right? Just barely squeak into the tournament and make a run. And we're seeing it again with this Orange team. And the Orange team right now is playing like not that they did early in the season. You've got Joe Girard and Buddy Boeheim looking like an outstanding backcourt right now. And at times this year they didn't. But right now they're thriving at the same time. They're shooting an incredible percentage. You've got the inside game has developed, fellow Canadian, and I'm proud to see him playing well for the Syracuse team. Quincy Guerrier, I think he's played excellent for this Syracuse team in the low post. Dolezaj's been capable down there. The one concern is the matchup here because, Houston's a really good three-point shooting team. And obviously, you got to be able to shoot the three when you're facing Boeheim's 2-3 zone. It's imperative to success. Houston should be able to do that very well in this game. But we keep coming back to the sticking point, the critical injury concern you've got with Houston, and that's Dejan Giroux going into this game. And when you consider that Grimes and Sasser and some of those secondary players, the supporting cast, didn't necessarily play a good game against Rutgers in that escape for the Cougars in that game, you get concerned about whether Giroux will be 100%. I don't think he will be. I'm hearing this might be 70%, 80% if he plays. And you give the kid credit for gutting through the Rutgers game the way he did. I thought that was an impressive display of just mental toughness, physical toughness to finish that game and try to get his team through to the finish line. But it's going to be more difficult here against Syracuse. Syracuse could get destroyed on the glass. That's a big-time worry for me in this game. Rebounding is a huge advantage for Houston, but guess what? You don't have to worry about getting your misses if you're not missing. And Syracuse has been very, very efficient shooting the basketball, particularly from the three-point line. And again, you don't have to worry about that rebounding disparity or that rebounding maybe disadvantage Syracuse might have if you're still going to shoot a high percentage from the field, which is something we've seen here in this game. I think I'm a little bit less inclined to like Syracuse if Giroux's fully healthy. I'm not convinced that's the case, and I think it's an impact, significant concern injury-wise here for this Houston team. A Houston team that just barely, and I mean barely, got by Rutgers in the last game. And that's with all due respect to Steve Peichel, who's done an incredible coaching job there with that Rutgers team. The moment they hired him from Stony Brook, I'm like, that's a guy that's going to get things going there in Piscataway. He's done that. But that was still an ugly performance from Houston. They're going to have to be a whole lot better here against Syracuse. And I think Syracuse makes this a game. So I like the points.
All right. And I got to tell you, I do like how Kelvin Sampson, carries himself on the bench there. He just kind of crosses his legs and just looks at the refs kind of like, what the hell is wrong with you guys? it's just, he makes me laugh every time I watch him. But great points there. Fantastic points. Kyle, let's hear what you have to say before I close it out.
So I see this line is 6.5 most places now. So we've gotten some money come in on Houston. It's hard to not at least lean Syracuse as an underdog just based on what you've seen year after year. Like Ian said, every year it's like, I don't know if Syracuse deserves to be in this tournament. And then they make a run in the tournament and everybody wants to bet against Boeheim, and he does great against the spread. They win those games outright. If you just look at the numbers, if you look at the matchups, I think Houston has a pretty good matchup in that, offensive rebounding, they'd get a lot of second chances. I think Houston's defense is tougher on the three-point defense than what Syracuse has been facing. Houston is a top 12 three-point defense 3 years in a row in the country. So can Buddy Boeheim and those guys keep making all those threes? They're 29 for 58 from three-point range in their 2 games in the NCAA tournament. My guess is they don't make near as many from 3 in this game. Obviously, I mean, they could prove me wrong. Syracuse has been just bombing them in like it's nothing. I do think I like the under in this game. I think this will be a lower scoring game. I hear some people talking on networks, major networks, Syracuse zone. Houston has seen zone defenses this year from Tulane and Tulsa. The problem is Syracuse's zone is different than those zone defenses. Syracuse is so good with that matchup zone. You can't say it's just a 2-3 zone or a 3-2 or anything. They kind of morph around. Sometimes they have 4 guys at the top. Sometimes they have 3, 2. They really move around extremely well in that matchup zone. Obviously, the one thing they can't do well is defensive rebound, and that is a concern if you bet Syracuse in this game, certainly. I don't want to lay the points here with Houston. I know that, some of the numbers look like it's a matchup advantage for Houston. Like Ian said, Giroux, we don't know. It looks like he's going to be 70 or 80%. He's really important, especially offensively for them. I think if I had to bet a side here, I'd bet Syracuse just because I've seen time and time again, them do so well in the NCAA tournament. I like the under better, though.
So, it's funny thing about this, and I've went back and forth a little bit on this spread when it was at 6. Was Houston ranks, high on defense, right? And they rank 12th in the nation on allowing 3-pointers at 29.2%, which is really good. And that's where you think that'd be like, well, there's your advantage right there because Syracuse is hitting at a 50% clip. They're going to do for regression. Houston's going to stop them. But my biggest problem about these stats is the American Athletic Conference absolutely sucks at offense. And I think it shades these stats. I mean, Memphis was number 2, and I think they're still top 3 or something on KenPom and defensive efficiency. Memphis, it makes me scratch my head. Like maybe this conference can't shoot the ball. I mean, UCF has never been known for shooting the ball, right? South Florida. Terrible teams in this conference, so it really takes me off of betting a favorite in this situation. But just the injury right there that Ian pointed out, and the things that Kyle sent there, I lean towards the under myself. I think that there's a good chance that Houston does slow them down because Houston can do that. Houston does do well in the rebounding, but they're not going to do as good against an ACC team. So I think that there could be some methodical play here. And if there is regression for Syracuse, they're not going to score as many points. And Houston is just not a good shooting team in general. They're not. And they don't win games by shooting. They win games by rebounding and playing great defense. So I have a very strong lean to the under as well in this game.
Nice little statistical ATS thing to throw out there about Houston. As a double-digit favorite, they've been dominant this year. You get them in a single-digit favorite range like this. The last 5 times they've been single-digit favorites, 1-4 against the spread. What does that tell you? When the competition gets tougher and they're playing better teams, they've struggled a little bit more. Look, they're a great team, and Sampson's done a phenomenal job. I'm not disputing that. But you're facing a better, higher quality of class now outside AAC competition, in my mind, and we're starting to see that. I mean, Houston barely got by Rutgers, who, of course, plays from a very good Big Ten conference, and I think they're going to have their hands full here. Again, I think outside the AAC, you're starting to see Houston having a grind and having to battle their way through wins a lot more.
I agree. Totally agree. And I think a side in this game, I just can't trust it. Any other games you want to quick throw out there for the Sunday, Ian?
I will throw out US. Let's make this the Bill Walton segment of this show here. The Conference of Champions here. We've got USC and Oregon. USC a slight favorite here against Oregon in this one. if you remember, these two teams played in the regular season, and USC dominated Oregon back in February. It was one of the worst games Oregon's played all year, 72-58 in favor of USC. The length and the athleticism, I think, of the Mobley twins down low really bothered Oregon a little bit. And look, USC blitzed. And USC's not always a great offensive team. I think we saw that against Kansas, where, defense is really what led them to that victory in that game. But they were bombing away from three. And Taj Edey, who is like averaging 13.8 points per game on the season, had 6 of 11 from three in that game, 24 points, way above his season average for points. There were some statistical anomalies and statistical outliers that went into that win, in my opinion, for USC. I'm going to need to see USC do it a second time against an Oregon team that I think is peaking right now, playing their best basketball, fully healthy, with Will Richardson, LJ Figueroa, Chris Duarte, Eugene Omoruyi, the Rutgers transfer, who I think is going to be critical. And he's given away some size in terms of height to these two Mobley twins, or Mobley brothers, Evan and Isaiah. But one thing you won't get from Eugene Omoruyi is him backing down, him giving an inch. His battle level, his toughness level, he's going to hang in that post and give those two guys everything they can handle in this game. And I think they're going to maybe get them in foul trouble. That's what you're going to hope for. And at the end of the day, Dane Altman's just a coach I don't like betting against, particularly as an underdog in March. How many times have we seen him have great success with Oregon in the tournament, took them to the Elite Eight the year they won the Pac-12 tournament? I think Oregon, if there's one, I know it was an ugly game, but there were some against USC in the regular season, but some statistical things that I don't think are going to duplicate themselves for USC. I trust Dane Altman to be, hey, we did this wrong, X, Y, and Z against USC. Here's how we have to fix X, Y, and Z. You give them a week to make those adjustments now going into this game against USC. I like the way Oregon's playing. I still think they're slightly better team than USC. I'll take the points with Oregon in a game I think they win straight up on the court.
Well, you're not making me feel better about my USC ticket, but what I will say is Andy Enfield did cover the spread of the Sweet 16 for Florida Gulf Coast, but of course he was a massive dog. He did not win the game, so there you go. Maybe Altman gets the best of him here. We are out of time. Where can our listeners find your great information, Ian?
You can follow me on Twitter at Bobano. I host the NHL Ice Guys show 7 days a week, NHL hockey from a betting perspective, and I'm on Pub Sports Radio doing NBA, college basketball, and baseball starting next week, which I'm looking forward to. I think we're all looking forward to a little MLB.
All right, make sure you guys check him out. And Kyle?
You can go to huntersportsfix.com, check out my premium plays there. Also, the free picks newsletter, you can sign up for that from that page. Follow me on Twitter at Kyle Hunter Picks.
All right, and check us out at the Odds Breakers. We'll have plenty of free picks, and for all of our members, we'll have some better premium picks for you as well. Everyone, thank you for tuning into this show. Have a blast watching the games, and go get some winners.